IVM.
Hi, we're Team Explainer. Welcome to an all-new episode of Press Decode, a weekly podcast where we take Explainer's mission to declutter the news one step further. Check out our newsletter for more stories and follow us at ExplainerIn to keep up with all the fun things that we plan for our Explainer fam. So sit back, relax, and don't let the news give you the blues. I'm Sara, and I have with me Vagda and Prafula. Take it away, Prafula.
Hi, everybody. I'm Prafula Grace, Explainer's very own grumpy old neighborhood uncle.
Hey guys, I'm Vagda. Considering you know Sara a little bit and now Prafula too, I am the only glimmer of hope and positivity on this podcast today.
I'm Sara, your host for the day. And since Vagda has already made me sound like a delightful person, I'm just going to jump right into our episode. As always, we have 3 segments for you. In our big story, in context of Aryan Khan's arrest, we will talk about how the law treats drug consumption both in India and around the world. In our Food for Thought segment, we will be talking about the accidental shooting on the sets of the movie Rust that fatally injured a cinematographer. We will look at prop guns and the general idea of safety or the lack thereof on film set. Finally, we will be roasting or toasting our fave and least fave items. All right, let's begin with our big story. Aryan Khan and 7 others were detained by the Narcotics Control Bureau on October 2nd. They are currently in judicial custody at the Arthur Road prison in Mumbai. Khan's bail plea has been rejected twice this month, and a third hearing is going on as we record this episode. The NCB also raided actress Ananya Pandey's residence and seized her phone and laptop based on WhatsApp chats between her and Khan. Though she has not been accused of anything as yet, she was summoned for interrogation. The arrests were part of an undercover sting operation conducted by the NCB on a cruise ship that was due to go from Mumbai to Goa. They managed to seize 13 grams of cocaine, 5 grams of mephedrone, 21 grams of charas, and 22 pills of MDMA. Now, there's a lot going on in this case that we've broken down in our explainer from October 22nd. There are shady witnesses, political accusations, an officer in charge whose controversies fave child. And
don't forget WhatsApp messages being considered the entire basis of this case.
Yes, it is that kind of case. But here's what is most interesting. This case is just one of many recent ones that take aim at Bollywood personalities. They involve very small quantities of drugs, but target big names. Think the Riya Chakravarti case. But this is very unlike the NCB. As one Mumbai police official puts it, even our constables hardly do consumption cases. Yet, the NCB is increasingly focused on small-time drug offenses. So let me explain this a little. Basically, different kinds of narcotics are classified into 3 categories: small, intermediate, and commercial. And the classification varies with different drugs. So for cannabis, 100 grams is small, but 1 kg is large or commercial. And anything in between is intermediate. Whereas, say with cocaine, 2 grams is small and 100 grams is commercial. So the sentence and the way your offense is treated varies with the amount that is seized from you. But why am I talking about this at all? In 2020, of the 59,806 drug cases, only 44% were related to distribution and trafficking, or the large category, while the larger share of 56% involved small amounts intended for personal consumption. So you can see there are skewed priorities, and I can't quite understand why.
I mean, it's quite clear like why you would have such high consumption cases is basically to bring your numbers up for conviction. It's so much easier to pick up homeless people in the middle of the night, produce them before a magistrate, have them plead guilty, give them a minor punishment and fine, and bring your numbers up. I mean, it's just easier for the police to do that because it's harder to catch a bigger fish. So that's the simple reason. And but my question is the larger question should be why consumption of drugs is a criminal offense at all, right?
Yeah.
Just the narrative that, oh my God, consumption of drugs is where does it come from? Let's look at how NDPS Act came about. This is India's main law prohibiting the production, manufacturing, cultivation, possession, sale and purchase, transport and storage, and consumption of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. Now, it's widely agreed that India and many other countries enacted their very strict drug laws under US pressure. The NDPS Act came in 1985 in the context of US President Nixon's so-called war on drugs. That is now largely seen as a patently racist propaganda against the African American and Hispanic population. And over the years, international consensus is now building on how the war on drugs has been largely a public health failure in terms of addressing addiction.
So every time the Americans decide to go on war.
Yes, that's it. You got it. But NDPS, when it had just come about, up until now also, I mean, for people who haven't really followed what the problem with the law is, they've lauded it as an airtight law with like strictest punishments and like mandatory minimum sentences in order to fulfill India's obligations under various international conventions, anti-drug conventions, which also came about in the 80s because of US pressure. But what do we have because of all of that? Think about it. When has deterrence ever been able to solve anything?
Yeah,
like
never.
Deterrence as a theory in punishment is really having the lowest point. That aside, the theory of deterrence sits on the assumption of rationality. And if you're trying to cut addiction, is it smart of you to think addicts would be rational in decision making? The whole point is lack of control, right?
Yeah.
Now, which brings me to my last point. If you had malaria, would I put you in jail for it?
I think this is exactly how policy change should be driven. Questions like this and make you sound like an idiot eventually when you have to answer.
Yes. Now, don't get me wrong. Over the years, there have been amendments in the law to make addiction more of a health-oriented issue. For consumers, there is room for rehabilitation in the law, saying Section 64A, which provides you immunity from prosecution if you're caught with small quantity, so long as you head to the de-addiction center, not jail. So you are still produced in court as a consumer or an addict. So it's either jail or de-addiction center. What are you going to think of de-addiction center as? You're going to think of it as a jail only.
Yeah.
That's why stigma comes in also. And the other problem with the law is that it doesn't make any distinction between consumers. Not all consumers are addicts. There are recreational users and there are problematic users. But even if you are an addict, is forced de-addiction the best way to deal with it? I don't know.
Yeah. And, like you mentioned, Vagda, the NDPS Act, and basically all the stigma around drug use in the last few decades stems from like 1970 America in the Nixon administration, because Richard Nixon basically declared drug abuse as public enemy number one. And like Vagda also said, there's a lot of discourse over whether the war on drugs is racist, which was basically confirmed in the 90s when Nixon's chief of domestic policy said in an absolutely insane interview, "Did we know we were lying about drugs? Of course we did."
Jesus Christ.
And it's not like the US has gotten any better at it. But of course, being the US in the international community, they love to posture. So they're one of the
It's not just the US, yeah. Come on, yeah.
I mean,
Sara, bring it in.
I mean, posturing. We just had the T20 World Cup early this week. There was a lot of posturing that happened.
The US deserves its fair share of bullying.
Fair.
Right?
Yeah. Fair. There I agree.
Because, I mean, with all of this, they're the ones who basically pushed, anti-drug agenda everywhere.
Yeah.
And now they have 11 states where cannabis is legalized and 35 states implemented the use of medical marijuana. Obviously, there's a lot happening in the states, but then you see the irony here. Right?
Yes.
Also, like when you think of legalized marijuana, we think of Europe, we think of the Netherlands. But interestingly enough, the Dutch only have like a tolerance policy, which allows for recreational use within certain bounds. It's countries like Canada, Uruguay, and Portugal that have legalized the consumption of marijuana and also created a fully legal market for weed, which means that adults can legally grow and harvest their own marijuana. And out of all these countries, Portugal has the most interesting and efficient take. The country legalized all drugs in 2001 and has seen dramatic drops in overdoses, HIV, and drug-related crime. The reason for this also is because Portugal took a one patient at a time stance, which provided drug users with the help they needed, whether it was socially, medically, or otherwise, because each person was told, you need to see a social worker, or you need to see a doctor, and they were not just dragged to jail. And back home, with the Aryan case, it's pretty bad, but we have the Sikkim Anti-Drug Act, which was enacted in 2006. Sikkim has had an illicit drug problem since the 80s. Initially, the act tried to prevent drug use through deterrence and enforcing stricter punishments, which obviously didn't work. And in 2017 and 18, the act was amended twice to take a public health approach instead, which has had incredible impact so far, with arrests and incarcerations having decreased significantly. The state government also uses awareness drives and peer education to tackle drug addiction. The reason why Sikkim and the Portuguese model work so well is because they've created a law that places the individual at the core of drug law reform.
That's the problem, no? For us in our drug law reform, what is at the center is politics.
Yeah. On that note, we come to the end of this segment. We will be back after a short break. You're listening to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network.
From uncensored and unfiltered chats with the who's who of the entertainment industry, I, Siddharth Kannan, bring your very heartcake chat show called Candid Kannan. Tune in every Friday on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome back to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network. We're Team Splainer, and make sure you follow us at SplainerIn on Instagram and Twitter to keep up with the Splainer fam. We're now ready for some food for thought. Last week, on October 23rd, actor Alec Baldwin accidentally killed a cinematographer and wounded a director by firing a prop gun on the set of a movie called Rust. Here's how the alarming disaster panned out. An assistant director grabbed the prop gun off a cart and handed it over to Baldwin, indicating incorrectly that the weapon didn't carry live rounds by yelling "cold gun," which is code for "this gun is safe to use." In the emergency call made after the shooting, the script supervisor on set squarely pinned the blame on the assistant director. Reports later even suggested the crew members were using prop guns like the one that caused the disaster for recreational live target practice, and they did this with real ammunition that may have accidentally been left in the weapon when it was handed over to Baldwin. But here's the thing, that's not all what went wrong on the sets of the film. Just hours before the accident, a camera crew walked off the set because there was a dispute over working conditions and the general flippant attitude towards safety on set. More alarmingly, this wasn't the first such incident on the sets of Rust itself. Baldwin's stunt double also accidentally fired 2 live rounds after being told the gun was safe. Then there were also allegations that the armorer or the firearms specialist in charge of the set was inexperienced. She's blamed of once handing a gun to an 11-year-old actor without checking it on a previous job.
Oh my God.
This is insane.
Yep. But here's the thing, right? Why are guns that are capable of shooting live ammunition anywhere close to a film set? I mean, we create huge sets that are anything but real, but suddenly with something as life-threatening as an actual firearm, we decide we need the authenticity of guns for like the shoot. What are these prop guns? How are they even allowed?
So prop guns could be toys, okay, that don't shoot at all. Like that your stupid cousins might have tried to scare you with in your childhood.
I'm concerned about your childhood experiences. Okay, first you had that Coke thing. Now you have these...
What Coke thing?
The Coke
We're talking about drugs here. No, there's no cocaine thing.
Pepsi, Coke, Coca-Cola with the ketchup and everything last
I don't know how you don't have cousins like these.
Okay,
anyway. But in context of film production, props could be real guns that shoot blanks. What are blanks? It's basically like a cartridge that's fired from a real or blank firing firearm. It doesn't contain a bullet, which is the actual projectile part of the cartridge, but instead it's loaded with enough gunpowder to create like a bright flash at the end of the barrel, which is called a muzzle flash. So if you'd see a gun being fired in a movie, you'd see that there'd be like an orange flash at the end of the barrel. That basically convinces you that the gun has been fired. And how do they create that? They create that by just putting the gunpowder instead of the bullet. Now, they usually contain like paper padding or wax to keep the gunpowder loaded in order to create that flash. But it could also be made of plastic or felt or cotton. But they're not entirely harmless because they can still cause a lot of injury when they're fired at close distance or not handled correctly. But the
And
thing
this
is,
public knowledge.
yes.
Interesting.
But over the course of the last week, I learned that gun safety on film sets is not that great because I didn't know about prop guns, even though it is common knowledge. Did you know that Bruce Lee's son, Brandon Lee, who was himself an actor, died after being shot with a prop gun on a movie set in 1993?
Wow, I did
What?
not actually.
In 1984, an American actor, John Eric Hexum, shot himself with a blank discharged from a pistol while playing with it, and he died.
Oh my God.
So these blanks containing wadding and gunpowder can be very dangerous, right? We don't know the exact circumstances of the cinematographer's death as the investigation is still on, but we know that Brandon Lee's death was caused by not properly checking the prop gun, as apparently a metal projectile was discharged instead of a blank. So what are you putting in that as well? Who knows? This got me thinking about how safe our movie sets are. Such prop guns are also used in film sets in India. You know, apparently on the sets of Shootout at Vadala in 2013, Anil Kapoor fired a blank bullet at John Abraham for a sequence. And instead of shooting it from 15 feet, he shot it from 5 feet and John Abraham hurt his neck. Obviously, he didn't die, but it's still pretty unsafe.
Like, I had to clarify, he didn't die. Like, yes, we know he's here.
Generally, the safety scene on movie sets isn't the best, right? We see in the context of stunt people and their safety. Did you know that insurance companies underwrite movie sets and primary equipment in like big budget films, but stunt artists are often ineligible for insurance because you're taking up risky work deliberately. Therefore, we can't insure you. Now, they compare movies to the airline industry, saying that the culture of safety is imbibed in the airline industry. It's always safety first in airline industry. Obviously, like the moment you get into an airport, it's all about like security check. Then you get into a plane and it's all still about your safety. But and that's the kind of comparison that insurers make. So if that is how unsafe being a stuntman is, shouldn't you be more careful? Shouldn't safety be the first priority? But obviously, because stunt people are generally not well off, nor they have a union, but it's not really, it doesn't have too much of a power. You're not going to get anywhere with that. And in today's day, when there is insurance for your cryptocurrency, you don't have any for the stuntman. You know the movie stunt business is not safe. So,
And remember the crew on the set of Rust who walked off after disagreements? They were apparently promptly replaced with a non-union crew.
Wow.
And this makes matters so much worse for the producers on set, right? And obviously this matters because while film sets are not safe even for union crews, and these guys have the support to negotiate work hours, safety, and pay, non-union members and freelancers are all on their own, so they're worse off. And it's also a very well-known fact that the film industry is notorious for ganging up against people who speak up, especially those behind the cameras. So even now, crew members who were on set and saw what happened refuse to speak to media persons unless they get to speak with anonymity because they fear they're going to lose jobs in the future. And although this camera person's death is not the first, it shows us exactly what happens when you have no backing or nobody paying close attention to your well-being. The shooting has added a lot of woes for film bigwigs, though, because film crews everywhere have already been protesting working conditions, especially after COVID lockdowns, because now they're being overworked to get all our shows and movies out on streaming platforms on time. So, unions are there, they are protesting, they are working, but not all of them have power. And after the news of American crews protesting working conditions, an Instagram account called Brit Crew Stories sprung up in the UK, posting dozens of horror stories. According to the account's admins, the page wants to, and I quote, show that we are conscious of what's going on, which means in the US, and feel the same about hours, rates, and deteriorating conditions in some productions in the UK. And also in Australia, campaign has gained momentum after all these reports from the UK and the US have emerged. A union survey apparently found that 2 out of 3 screen workers have apparently fallen asleep while driving back home because they work dangerously long hours. And honestly, this Australian campaign makes a perfect case for unions because the campaign called Wake Up Call has been working to put pressure on film and television producers to improve working conditions and, set reasonable production schedules. And now, as negotiations between studios and producers have been taking place, Australian screen crews finally will be given a chance to outline how the industry can develop safer working practices and better family-friendly work hours.
Tell me, is there any space where the labor law actually applies and does good?
From what we've seen, nothing. I think from what I've seen, it's full of loopholes, and all these bigwigs happily take advantage of that, like with the insurance thing that we talked about.
And it's horrifying also how low the bar is. Like, we're happy about safer working practices, family-friendly work hours. Like, that's the win.
Yeah, I didn't fall asleep at the wheel. Yay for me. I didn't die today. It has to be. We have to do better than this, right?
Yeah. Anyway, with that, we come to the end of our segment. We will be right back after a short break. You're listening to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, it's been a great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On The Habit Coach, Ashton is in conversation with Alec Baldwin, CEO of Work on Your Game Inc. They discuss the athletic mindset and what it takes to be a great athlete. On All Things Policy, Arjun Gargaya speaks to Atish Padi about fantasy sport platforms and Karnataka's online gambling ban. On the Life Manifesto, Zarina decodes the concept of emotional maturity. I wonder what emotionally mature people really do. On Naan Kari, Sadaf and Archit are joined by author Sudha Menon. They discuss comfort food and Sudha's upcoming book. On Say No to Drama, Chetna cuts through the drama around Instagram posts and comments. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week: Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch Kuber, Slay Coffee, Intel, Kotak Mahindra Bank, and Oxfam India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network. It's time for our final segment this week, Roast or Toast.
So I decided to stick with my Grinch roots and take this week's least fave. But I am going to apologize in advance. My pick is all sorts of gory and awful and horror movie material, basically. So we all know Anthony Fauci, the COVID hero of our times. But a recent report has revealed that a research division under Dr. Fauci has been testing experimental drugs on beagles. And brace yourselves, it gets worse. I'm not going into details. But in one instance, 44 beagle puppies were deliberately infected with parasites that literally ate the poor things alive while they were chained and locked up. To read that only caused me so much pain. So I'm just going to leave it at this. And let's move on to happier topics so we can quickly forget.
Yes.
What I have just said.
Yeah, that sounds horrifying. So, surprise, surprise, I guess. I have a fave item this week, but this deserves a mention. The Colombian government has unveiled a new anti-machismo hotline that aims to fight violence against women. Men can call the calm line to talk through their feelings of jealousy, fear, and rage. The logic behind it, I quote, by pushing men to focus on how that often unexamined attitude of machismo is hurting their lives and the lives of those around them, the program seeks to inspire a profound cultural change. I'm just pleasantly surprised for once that the blame of violence against women isn't placed on the women. I know the bar is very low, but it made me very happy.
Yes, it is. It's good news.
It really is.
My favorite this week is one of the curious facts that we carried on Wednesday. Michelangelo hated his day job. Guys! He particularly hated painting the Sistine Chapel, which took him 4 years to do, by the way, 65 feet in the air on custom scaffolding.
And there were rumors. Michelangelo, you and me.
There were rumors that he painted while lying down, but that's not the case. So can you imagine craning your neck to paint your ceiling for 4 straight years? And obviously, if I would do that, what it would look like, it wouldn't look like what the Sistine Chapel looks like. Anyway, what I love about the story is the poem he wrote to his friend talking of the emotional tension. He wrote a poem. I mean, if I gave that much thought to my work-life rants, I would have to rant about giving it that much thought.
See, I know Vagda, and I know that both of them are very real possibilities.
Now, I have a bit from his rant. Poem here. I'm going to quote. I've already grown a goiter from this torture, hunched up here like a cat in Lombardy or anywhere else where the stagnant waters poison. My stomach squashed under my chin, my beard's pointing at heaven, my brain's crushed in a casket, my breast twists like a harpy's, my brush above me at all the time dribbles paint so my face makes a fine floor for droppings. Oh my God, guys.
I feel so bad for him.
You feel bad for him? I feel bad for myself. I feel bad for the quality of my work-life rant.
Fair.
But you must go and read. There is more to the poem, guys. Must go and read it.
Anyway, that was our show this week. Thank you so much for joining us on Press Decode. You can catch us every Thursday on the IVM Podcast Network. And guys, please remember, don't let the news give you the blues.
Eventually, you'll see the end of your childhood,
Get accustomed to womanhood.
enjoy the experience of sisterhood,
Might get to wifehood
or not, choose motherhood,
or not. You'll learn to define your personhood.
earn a livelihood,
Change the neighborhood.
and get rid of the falsehood that life post-academia is easy.
So join me, Natasha,
And me, Ayushi,
on a journey from station starting point.
to station, what now?
Next station, Pudin station, and hopefully, Agla station, adulthood.
Fresh episodes out every Thursday.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcast. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.